What should have been a moment of betrayal and heartbreak turned into the catalyst for justice and community transformation that I never expected. Standing in Diana Mitchell's pristine sunroom, staring at the empty garment bag where my wedding dress should have been, I realized I had a choice: to collapse into tears or to use this moment to finally confront the truth I'd been avoiding for months. Sometimes the universe has strange ways of pushing you toward your true purpose, and the loss of that dress would set in motion events that would change not just my life, but an entire community. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I've always prided myself on seeing through deception. As a corporate lawyer at Hamilton and Price, my job was finding the truth buried in mountains of paperwork, spotting the clause that didn't belong, the number that didn't add up. My parents, Robert and Grace Chen, had taught me through their immigrant journey that success came from equal parts hard work and careful observation. "Always read the fine print, Emily," my father would say. "That's where they hide what they don't want you to see." Ironic, then, how completely I'd missed the red flags with the Mitchell family until that sunny April afternoon, 3 weeks before my wedding. The day had started perfectly. Zoe, my best friend since law school, had driven me to the Mitchell estate to make final alterations to my wedding dress, a vintage 1950s gown I'd discovered in a tiny boutique and restored with my mother. The dress represented everything about my heritage and future coming together. My mother's careful handiwork, alongside the new life I was building with Nathan Mitchell, rising star of Westlake City's real estate world, and the man I'd fallen for despite our different backgrounds. "Mrs. Mitchell?" I called, stepping into the marbled foyer of the family mansion. "Diana, I'm here for my final fitting." The house sat silent, unusual for the Mitchell home that typically bustled with staff and family members. Nathan's mother had insisted on keeping my dress at her house. "Tradition," she'd said with her perfect socialite smile that never quite reached her eyes. I'd agreed, despite my reservations, another compromise in a growing list of them since becoming engaged to Nathan. "Hello?" I called again, my voice echoing through the cavernous space. "She's in the garden with the landscapers," came Olivia's voice as Nathan's sister descended the grand staircase. Something about the roses not being perfect enough for the wedding photos. Olivia and I shared a knowing look. Diana's perfectionism had made wedding planning an exercise in diplomacy. "I'll just grab my dress from the guest suite and get out of her way," I said, heading toward the east wing. "Emily," Olivia called after me, something in her voice making me turn. "I think you should know that Mom's been acting strange about your dress. I overheard her on the phone yesterday. Something about it not being Mitchell material." My stomach tightened, but I forced a smile. "Your mother has opinions about everything. I'm sure it's fine." The guest suite door stood slightly ajar, and as I pushed it open, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The garment bag that had held my dress hung empty in the open closet. The vintage jewelry box containing my grandmother's pearl hairpins sat open, empty. "No," I whispered, heart pounding as I searched the room, checking under the bed, behind, furniture in the adjoining bathroom. Nothing. A small noise from the doorway made me turn. Diana Mitchell stood there, immaculately dressed in cream linen, not a blonde hair out of place, her expression a carefully constructed mask of sympathy that didn't match the triumph in her eyes. "Oh, Emily, dear, are you looking for your dress?" The slight pause, the subtle emphasis making clear exactly what she thought of my restored vintage gown. "Where is it, Diana?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I'm afraid there's been a terrible misunderstanding. The cleaning staff must have thought it was being donated with the items for the charity drive. Everything was taken away this morning," she sighed dramatically. "These things happen. But don't worry. I've already called my personal shopper at Bergdorf's. They're holding several suitable options for you." The room seemed to tilt slightly as the implications hit me. My dress, with my mother's careful embroidery, the generations-old lace we'd incorporated from my grandmother's wedding kipao, the hundreds of hours of work, was gone. And it wasn't an accident. You threw away my wedding dress. It wasn't. A question. Diana's perfect features arranged themselves into a practiced look of offense. I would never. It was an unfortunate mistake. Besides, Emily, let's be honest. That vintage piece wasn't really appropriate for a Mitchell bride. The alterations were quaint, but hardly what Nathan's position in society calls for. Something inside me went very still and cold. This wasn't just about a dress. This was the culmination of 1,000 small cuts, the comments about my exotic features, the suggestions that I change my last name completely rather than hyphenate, the constant reminders of the Mitchell family's generations of wealth compared to my family's immigrant restaurant business. Where exactly did you donate it? I asked, my lawyer mind already working. I'll contact them immediately. Diana waved a manicured hand dismissively. Some women's shelter downtown, but it's already been processed and distributed. You won't get it back, and honestly, it's for the best. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a confidential tone. Nathan needs a wife who understands the world he comes from. Your background is charming, but this is your chance to truly become part of our family. Let me help you select something more suitable. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Zoe. Emergency. Need to talk before fitting. Don't show Mitchell anything. Call me now. The urgency in her message made me pause. Zoe wasn't prone to dramatics. I need to take this, I said, stepping around Diana. Emily, Diana called after me, her voice hardening slightly. Don't make this difficult. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Let's focus on moving forward, shall we? The past is the past. The irony of her statement would soon become apparent to us both. Outside in the garden, safely away from Diana's ears, I called Zoe. Thank God, she answered immediately. Are you alone? Can you talk? Yes, what's going on? And Diana threw away my wedding dress. Literally had it accidentally donated somewhere. That's horrible, but right now we have bigger problems, Zoe said, her voice tense. Marcus handed me a file this morning that was supposed to go to you. It's regarding the Riverside District property acquisitions, the ones Nathan's company is developing. My stomach dropped. Riverside was a historic, primarily immigrant neighborhood that Mitchell Properties was redeveloping into luxury condominiums. Nathan had assured me the project was being handled ethically, with fair compensation to all property owners. I'd even used my legal expertise to help review some of the contracts. What about them? I asked, already dreading the answer. Emily, the documents show systematic fraud. They've been using predatory tactics, fake code violations, manipulated property assessments, even threats of immigration enforcement to force people to sell below market value. There's evidence Nathan personally directed some of it. The firm is trying to decide whether to pursue action or bury it because of your engagement. The world tilted again, this time more violently. Nathan, who held my hand as we walked through Chinatown restaurants reminiscent of my childhood. Nathan, who claimed to value my perspective as the daughter of immigrants. Nathan, who had promised me his development work was about improving communities, not exploiting them. There's more, Zoe continued. Remember how you insisted on that ethical business practices clause in your prenup? The one Diana thought was so amusing? If Nathan's actions violate state real estate laws, which these documents suggest they do, it triggers the transparency provisions. Not just financial disclosure, but full legal exposure. Diana's voice floated from the patio door. Emily, who are you talking to, dear? We really should discuss the dress situation. I turned to see her watching me, suspicion clouding her features. I need to see those documents, I told Zoe quietly. And I need to find out exactly where my dress went. Already on it, Zoe replied. Meet me at my place in an hour. And Em, be careful. If what's in these files is accurate, there's a lot at stake for the Mitchells. As I hung up, staring at Diana Mitchell's perfectly composed face, something crystallized within me. The dress wasn't just a dress. It was a symbol of everything the Mitchells thought they could take from me. My heritage, my identity, my principles. And I'd let them, compromise by compromise, in the name of love. "You know what, Diana?" I said calmly. "You're right. The past is the past. But the future? The future is still very much undecided." The look of momentary uncertainty that flashed across her features told me she sensed something had changed. She didn't know that her attempt to erase my heritage had instead awakened it. The fighting spirit of my parents who had started with nothing, the precision of my legal training, and a determination that had been dormant for too long. My wedding dress was gone, but so was my willingness to look the other way. Zoe's apartment, a cozy loft in downtown Westlake, had become a war room by the time night fell. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Spread across her dining table were documents, maps, and photographs detailing the full extent of Mitchell Properties' activities in Riverside. "They targeted the most vulnerable first," Zoe explained, pointing to a map with color-coded markers. "Elderly homeowners, recent immigrants with language barriers, families with underwater mortgages. Classic predatory development strategy. Create a foothold, then use mounting pressure and declining property values to force out the holdouts." I studied a photograph of Nathan shaking hands with a city inspector outside a Riverside building. Dated notes on the back indicated it was taken the day before the building was suddenly deemed structurally unsound, and its residents, primarily Vietnamese families, were forced to evacuate with just 48 hours' notice. Mitchell Properties had purchased the property the following week for pennies on the dollar. "I can't believe I didn't see it," I whispered. "He told me they were dangerous buildings, that they were helping these people find safer housing." "You saw what you wanted to see," Zoe said gently. "We all do sometimes." My phone buzzed with Nathan's name on the screen. The 5th call in 2 hours. I sent it to voicemail again. "You'll have to talk to him eventually," Zoe pointed out. "Not until I have all the facts," I replied, returning to the documents. "There's something we're missing. Nathan's too smart to leave such an obvious paper trail." The doorbell rang, startling us both. Zoe checked the security camera on her phone and relaxed. "It's Tyler Johnson," she said, "former project manager for Mitchell Properties. Marcus said he's the one who brought these documents to the firm originally." Tyler was a weathered man in his 40s, with tired eyes and nervous hands that couldn't quite stay still. He'd worked for Mitchell Properties for nearly a decade before being abruptly terminated 6 months ago. "Ms. Chen," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I wasn't sure you'd be willing to meet with me, given your connection to the family." "I'm willing to hear the truth, Mr. Johnson. That's all." He nodded, satisfied with my answer. "Then you should see these too." He placed a USB drive on the table. Internal communications, financial records, and recordings of meetings that weren't in the files I gave your firm. I was holding them back as insurance. Over the next several hours, the full picture emerged. Worse than I had imagined. The Riverside development wasn't just one project of many for Mitchell Properties. It was the cornerstone of a new business model. They had secured city contracts based on promises of affordable housing units and community investment that internal documents showed they never intended to fulfill. "They call it the churn," Tyler explained bitterly. "Buy distressed properties through intimidation tactics, perform cosmetic renovations, secure inflated appraisals from friendly assessors, flip to subsidiary companies to hide the paper trail, then convert to luxury units with the city's blessing. The profits are enormous, and the displaced families have nowhere to go." "And Nathan?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Tyler's expression said it all. "He's not just involved, Ms. Chen. He created the model. Diana handles the political connections and charitable foundation that gives them cover, but Nathan is the architect of the whole system. A photograph showed Nathan accepting a Community Builder Award at a charity gala, while another document dated the same day outlined tactics for pressuring an elderly Chinese couple to sell their Riverside grocery store through targeted building, code enforcement. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Zoe asked. Tyler's face darkened. "I tried. Quietly at first, through proper channels. Then I was fired, with threats of legal action if I spoke out. The Mitchells have half the city council in their pocket through the family foundation. Nobody would touch it." He looked directly at me. "Until your law firm got involved because of you." My phone lit up again. Not Nathan this time, but Olivia. Where are you?" she asked when I answered. "Nathan's going crazy. Mom told him you freaked out over a dress and stormed off." I closed my eyes briefly. "It's more complicated than that, Liv." A pause. "This isn't just about the dress, is it?" Olivia's voice had dropped to nearly a whisper. "It's about Riverside." My breath caught. "What do you know about Riverside?" "Enough to have nightmares," she admitted. "I designed the model units, Emily. I've seen the properties before and after. The people who lived there. I've asked questions for months and gotten nowhere. Nathan just says it's business and to stay in my lane." "I need your help, Olivia," I said, making a quick decision. "And I think the people of Riverside need it too." After a moment's hesitation, she said, "Mom and Nathan are hosting the foundation gala at the Westlake Grand tomorrow night. Everyone who's anyone in city development will be there. Whatever you're planning, that would be the time." After we hung up, Zoe looked at me with concern. "What exactly are you planning, Em?" I looked over the scattered evidence of the Mitchells' systematic exploitation and thought of my dress, with its careful stitching and heritage details, now gone because Diana Mitchell deemed it unworthy. "I'm going to need a different kind of dress for tomorrow night," I said finally, "and copies of everything we have here. The Mitchells are about to learn that prenups work both ways." The following evening, the Westlake Grand Hotel ballroom glittered with Westlake City's elite. The annual Mitchell Family Foundation Gala was the social event of the season, where generous donations bought influence and photo opportunities with the city's most powerful family. Diana had outdone herself this year. Ice sculptures of the planned Riverside luxury towers flanked the stage, while boards displayed artistic renderings of the revitalized neighborhood, all gleaming glass and manicured greenery, with no trace of the vibrant cultural community being displaced. I arrived alone, dressed not in designer couture but in a kipao my mother had made, rich red silk with gold embroidery, a deliberate statement of the heritage Diana had tried to erase. Conversations faltered as I passed. After my disappearance yesterday, followed by my refusal to answer Nathan's increasingly frantic calls, rumors had clearly spread. Diana spotted me first, her champagne glass freezing halfway to her lips. She recovered quickly, gliding over with her perfect hostess smile firmly in place. "Emily, darling, we've been so worried." Her voice was honey over steel. "Nathan's been beside himself. And what are you wearing? We specifically selected Valentino for the host family." "I thought I'd wear something that couldn't be thrown away," I replied calmly. "Something that represents who I really am." Her smile tightened. "This isn't the time for a cultural statement, dear. The mayor is here and the development commissioner. Tonight is crucial for the Riverside project announcements." "Oh, I'm counting on that." I glanced around the room. "Where is Nathan?" "Working. The room, as he should be." "Emily, whatever is bothering you, let's discuss it privately. After the gala." I met her gaze directly. "It's too late for private discussions, Diana. Much too late." Understanding dawned in her eyes. Too late. As Nathan appeared at my side, relief washing over his handsome features. "Emily, thank God." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "What's going on?" You disappear, won't answer my calls, and now you show up dressed like my mother's daughter? I supplied. The woman whose heritage you claim to respect while your family literally threw it away? Confusion crossed his face. Is this about the dress? Mom told me what happened, and I agree it was unfortunate. But we can buy any dress you want. He lowered his voice. This is hardly the place for this discussion. Actually, I said clearly, this is exactly the right place. A room full of people you've been lying to, celebrating a project built on exploitation and fraud. Nathan's face drained of color as Diana stepped closer, her voice a threatening whisper. You're making a scene. Stop this immediately. You should have thought about consequences when you decided my heritage was disposable, Diana, I replied. Or when you encouraged your son to build your fortune on the backs of families just like mine. The room had gone silent, the mayor and other dignitaries now watching our exchange with undisguised interest. Olivia appeared at the edge of the crowd, giving me a slight nod. Behind her stood Zoe, Tyler, and, to my surprise, Kevin Daniels, Westlake City's most dogged investigative reporter. Nathan gripped my arm. Whatever you think you know, you've been misinformed. Let's talk privately. I pulled away. I'm a corporate lawyer, Nathan. I don't act without evidence. I turned toward the crowd. Evidence, I'm afraid, changes tonight's narrative considerably. What happened next would be described in Westlake newspapers as either a shocking ambush or a long overdue reckoning, depending on which paper you read. As Nathan and Diana watched in horror, the carefully curated presentations about the Riverside project were replaced, thanks to Olivia's access codes, with the truth. On the massive screens surrounding the ballroom appeared documents, photographs, and recordings showing the systematic exploitation of Riverside residents. Tyler's recorded conversations with Nathan planning pressure tactics for vulnerable homeowners. Internal emails joking about scaring the immigrants with fake immigration enforcement threats. Before and after pictures of homes declared uninhabitable, on flimsy pretexts, only to be minimally renovated and sold at 500% markups. Stop this immediately, Diana commanded, but the hotel staff looked uncertainly between her and the damning evidence now visible to everyone in the room. The mayor stepped forward, his political instincts clearly calculating the public relations disaster unfolding. What is the meaning of this, Nathan? Nathan's expression had transformed from confusion to cold fury. This is a complete fabrication. Disgruntled ex-employees, manipulated documents. He turned to me. And apparently a fiancé who's having serious cold feet. I reached into my purse and removed a document, handing it to Kevin Daniels. This isn't about cold feet, Nathan. It's about the prenuptial agreement you signed so eagerly, particularly Section 7, regarding ethical business practices and the consequences of fraudulent activity. The color drained from Diana's face. You wouldn't dare. The prenup you thought protected your family's assets actually required full disclosure and legal compliance, I explained, my voice carrying in the silent room. The evidence triggers the transparency clause. All Mitchell Properties records related to Riverside and similar projects must be open to legal scrutiny. Nathan lunged for the document, but the reporter stepped back, already taking photographs of the key passages with his phone. You're making a mistake, Nathan hissed. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? What we could have been together? I looked at him. Really looked at the man I'd agreed to marry. Handsome, ambitious, and completely ruthless. A man who could speak passionately about community development while systematically destroying communities. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said quietly. The mistake was thinking you were someone you're not. Turning to address the shocked crowd, I continued. My parents came to this country with nothing but hope and determination. They built a life and a business through hard work and respect for their community. The families of Riverside deserve that same chance, not to be exploited by predatory development disguised as progress. As security guards approached, summoned by Diana's frantic gestures, Jasmine Torres stepped forward from where she'd been waiting by the door. As the director of Riverside's Community Advocacy Center, she brought with her a dozen residents, whose homes and businesses had been targeted by Mitchell Properties. "These are the real faces of Riverside," Jasmine announced clearly, "not the empty luxury condos in your displays." An elderly Vietnamese woman stepped forward. "They tell me, my building unsafe after 40 years. Then I see in paper my home now luxury condo selling for millions." A middle-aged Latino man added, "They reported my restaurant for violations that didn't exist, then offered to buy for half its value when my business was suspended." Story after story emerged, creating a damning counterpoint to the glossy narrative. The Mitchells had been selling. The development commissioner looked physically ill. The mayor was already edging toward the exit. Nathan's face had transformed into something ugly and unfamiliar. "You've destroyed everything," he spat. "Are you happy now?" I thought of my wedding dress, carefully crafted to honor my past while embracing my future, discarded because it didn't fit Diana Mitchell's vision of who I should be. "I haven't destroyed anything worth keeping," I replied. "And this isn't destruction. It's the beginning of something better." As hotel security created a pathway for the increasingly agitated Mitchells to exit through a side door, Olivia remained behind, coming to stand beside me. "I knew something was wrong," she said quietly. "I just didn't want to see how wrong." Kevin Daniels was already furiously taking notes, while other reporters who had been covering the gala were calling for additional photographers. The story was breaking in real time. Zoe squeezed my hand. "You good?" I watched as Nathan and Diana were escorted from their own gala, their carefully constructed facade shattered beyond repair. "No," I admitted, "but I will be, and more importantly, Riverside might be too." As the gala disintegrated into chaos around us, Jasmine Torres approached me with determined eyes. "That was brave," she said, "but exposing the problem is just the beginning. These people still need homes, businesses, a community. Stopping the Mitchells is only the first step." I looked at the Riverside residents, now speaking animatedly with reporters and city officials who had previously ignored them. Then at Tyler, Olivia, and Zoe, all people with different skills and perspectives united by a desire for justice. "You're right," I said, the first inklings of a new purpose forming. "This can't just be about what we're against. It has to be about what we're for." That night, amid the wreckage of what should have been a celebration of my future with the Mitchell family, the seeds of something far more meaningful took root. Diana had thrown away my wedding dress, thinking she was erasing my past. Instead, she had inadvertently cleared the way for a future none of us could have imagined, one where the traditions worth preserving would find new expression in justice and community renewal. And the prenup she had so confidently dismissed, it would prove to be just the beginning. The days following the Mitchell Family Foundation Gala unfolded in a whirlwind of headlines, legal maneuvers, and unexpected alliances. I awoke the morning after to find my face splashed across the front page of the Westlake Tribune with the headline, "Lawyer Bride Exposes Real Estate Scheme at Society Gala." My phone had over 200 missed calls and messages, from former classmates, colleagues, journalists, and even a few Riverside residents who had somehow obtained my number. Zoe's loft had become my temporary sanctuary after it became clear that returning to the apartment Nathan and I had shared was not an option. His final message, sent at 3:17 a.m., made that abundantly clear. "You've made your choice. Your things will be in storage. The locks are changed. My lawyers will contact yours. You need security," Marcus insisted when he arrived at Zoe's that morning, legal files tucked under his arm. As senior partner at Hamilton and Price, he had moved quickly to position the firm in the aftermath of my public revelations. "The Mitchells have friends in every corner of this city, Emily. This isn't just about a broken engagement anymore. I looked out Zoe's window at the gathering reporters below. I'm not afraid of them. You should be, Marcus replied grimly. Diana Mitchell sits on half the charitable boards in Westlake. Nathan has golfing buddies throughout the judiciary. And the amount of money at stake in the Riverside development. He shook his head. The firm is behind you, but this won't be a clean fight. He wasn't wrong. By noon, a counter-narrative was already emerging in the business press. I was a jilted bride who had fabricated evidence in a fit of pre-wedding hysteria. Sources close to the Mitchell family suggested I had become increasingly unstable as the wedding approached, inventing conspiracy theories when Nathan had gently suggested postponing our nuptials. They're laying groundwork for a defamation suit, Zoe observed, scrolling through the articles. Classic Mitchell playbook: attack the messenger, muddy the facts, leverage media connections to shift the narrative. Tyler arrived with more concerning news. They've accelerated the Riverside demolition schedule. Crews showed up this morning at 3 buildings on Maple Street with eviction notices, claiming the residents have 48 hours to vacate due to emergency structural concerns. They can't do that, I protested. Not with the evidence now public. They're betting they can bulldoze the evidence before any legal action sticks, Tyler explained. Once those buildings are gone, proving what was or wasn't structurally necessary becomes much harder. I grabbed my coat. We need to get to Riverside. Now. Jasmine Torres met us at the community center, a converted church basement already buzzing with anxious residents. Maps of the neighborhood covered bulletin boards, red marks indicating properties. Already lost to Mitchell properties, yellow showing those currently under threat. The eviction crews arrived with police escorts, Jasmine explained, her voice tight with controlled anger. Most of these families have nowhere to go on such short notice, but the officers said they're just enforcing the law. Mrs. Nguyen, the elderly Vietnamese woman who had spoken at the gala, approached us with dignity despite her obvious distress. My grandson say you are lawyer who stand up to Mitchell man, she said, studying me carefully. My building on list for tomorrow. 50 years I live there. Raise family, build community. They say not safe, but nothing wrong except they want land. I looked around the room at the faces, families who had built lives here, small business, owners who had invested everything in their shops and restaurants, elderly residents who had nowhere else to go. This wasn't just about exposing the Mitchells anymore. These were real people with immediate needs. We need an emergency injunction, I told Jasmine, and documentation of the current building conditions before anything changes. Kevin Daniels, the reporter who had captured the Prenup revelation, had followed us to Riverside. I can help with documentation, he offered. Photos, video, interviews with structural engineers if you can find them. I know several who owe me favors, Marcus said, already on his phone. The next 12 hours became a race against time and Mitchell money. While I drafted emergency motions, Zoe coordinated with city council members who had quickly distanced themselves from the Mitchell family in the wake of the scandal. Tyler used his knowledge of the development plans to identify which properties were most at risk, while Olivia, who had appeared unexpectedly at the community center, still dressed in her gala clothes, provided insider details about which city officials might be sympathetic to our cause. Judge Watkins, she suggested quietly. He rejected Dad's offer of a reduced price on a condo last year. Said it didn't pass his smell test. Diana's hated him ever since. By midnight, we had assembled enough evidence and legal arguments to file for an emergency hearing. I hadn't slept in nearly 36 hours, running on adrenaline and the fierce determination, sparked by Mrs. Nguyen's dignified plea. You should rest, Jasmine told me as we finished the last affidavits. Tomorrow will be another battle. I'll rest when these families are secure, I replied, reviewing our motions one final time. What none of us expected was the scale of the Mitchells' overnight counteroffensive. When I arrived at the courthouse the next morning, I found not only their usual corporate legal team, but 5 additional attorneys from Braddock and Stern, the city's most aggressive litigation firm. Nathan stood among them, immaculately dressed in his most conservative suit, looking for all the world like the wronged party. "A restraining order against me?" He approached as I waited outside the courtroom. "Really, Emily?" I kept my expression neutral, though the sight of him still caused a physical ache somewhere beneath my ribs. "The order is to protect the Riverside. Residents, not me." "This could have been handled privately," he said, lowering his voice. "We could have found a compromise. Instead, you chose public humiliation. Do you have any idea what you've done to my mother, to our family name?" "What about what you've done to the families in Riverside?" I countered. "What about Mrs. Nugent, who raised 3 generations in her building that you suddenly declared uninhabitable? Or Mr. Diaz, whose restaurant passed health inspections for 20 years until your consultant showed up?" A flash of something, perhaps genuine regret, crossed his features before his expression hardened again. "Business is complicated. You've only seen one side of this." "I've seen enough." "Miss Chen," his lead attorney interrupted, a shark-eyed woman with a Boston accent, "given your personal relationship with my client, we believe you have a profound conflict of interest in representing these complainants. We'll be moving to have you disqualified." "I anticipated that," Marcus said, appearing at my side. "Which is why I'll be lead counsel, with Miss Chen as co-counsel given her specific knowledge of the case." The courtroom doors opened, and we filed in to find Judge Watkins already reviewing our emergency filings. He was a no-nonsense jurist known for his impatience with procedural delays and technical loopholes, exactly what we needed. The Mitchell team immediately moved to have the proceedings closed to the public, citing sensitive business information. Judge Watkins glanced at the crowded gallery, where Riverside residents sat alongside reporters and community advocates. "This matter involves public safety claims and city ordinances," he noted dryly. "I see no reason for secrecy. Motion denied." It was our first small victory in what would become a grueling 7-hour hearing. The Mitchell lawyers argued that the buildings in question posed imminent danger to occupants, producing engineering reports that seemed comprehensive until Marcus cross-examined their authors and revealed they had never actually entered some of the buildings they'd condemned. Our own experts presented contrasting assessments, documenting the actual conditions with time-stamped photographs and detailed structural analyses conducted overnight. Kevin Daniels had worked through the night with his team, producing a compelling visual record that directly contradicted the Mitchell claims. Throughout it all, Diana Mitchell sat in the front row behind her son, her expression a careful mask of dignified concern. Only once did our eyes meet, when Mrs. Nayugan was testifying about the community garden she had tended for decades, now slated to become a parking structure. "This garden feed many families," Mrs. Nayugan explained proudly. "When children hungry, after school, they pick vegetables to take home. When neighbors sick, we bring soup made from garden herbs. This not just dirt and plants. This history, heritage, family." Diana's gaze flicked to mine, and I saw something unexpected, a flicker of genuine discomfort, before her mask of patrician disapproval returned. Perhaps even Diana Mitchell could recognize the parallels between heritage discarded and communities destroyed. At 4:37 p.m., Judge Watkins issued his ruling: a 30-day stay on all demolition and eviction activities in Riverside, pending a full review of the permitting process and the establishment of an independent panel to assess the actual structural conditions of the buildings in question. Furthermore, he added, fixing Nathan with a stern look, "Given the serious allegations of fraud and intimidation, I am ordering the city to conduct a complete audit of all Mitchell Properties development activities within city limits for the past 5 years. All permits are frozen until this audit is complete." The gallery erupted in muted cheers as Nathan and his attorneys huddled in urgent consultation. Diana Mitchell rose with rigid dignity and exited without a backward glance. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Riverside residents standing alongside housing advocates, local business owners, and others who had followed the rapidly unfolding story. Jasmine pulled me into an impromptu press conference. "This is just a first step," she cautioned the assembled reporters. "A temporary reprieve. But it shows that when communities stand together against predatory development, justice is possible." A reporter thrust a microphone toward me. "Ms. Chen, do you regret exposing your fiancé's business practices so publicly? Couldn't this have been handled more discreetly?" The question struck at something I'd been struggling with through the sleepless nights and frantic legal work. Did I regret the public nature of the confrontation? The humiliation it had caused not just to Nathan and Diana, but to Olivia and others in the Mitchell orbit who might not have been directly involved? "What I regret," I said carefully, "is not asking more questions sooner, not looking more closely at business practices that affected vulnerable communities. The people of Riverside deserved advocacy long before it became personal for me." Another reporter called out, "Is it true you're only doing this because Diana Mitchell threw away your wedding dress?" The crowd's murmur suggested this narrative. No, doubt planted by Mitchell publicists had gained traction. I felt a moment of fury at the trivializing implication, but before I could respond, Mrs. Nayugan stepped forward, her small frame somehow commanding immediate attention. "This not about dress," she said firmly. "This about homes, lives, community built over generations." She turned to me with surprising gentleness. "But dress also matter. When they throw away your heritage, they tell you who they really are. You see truth then." Her words hit with unexpected force. She was right. Diana discarding my dress had been illuminating, not because of the dress itself, but because it revealed a pattern of disregard that extended far beyond fabric and lace. "Mrs. Nugent is right," I acknowledged. The dress incident opened my eyes to a larger truth I had been avoiding. And sometimes, once you see the truth, public accountability is the only responsible path forward. As the crowd dispersed, Olivia approached hesitantly. She had testified in our favor during the hearing, providing damning details about her brother's directive to target specific vulnerable properties, an act of courage that had visibly enraged both Nathan and Diana. "I found something," she said, quietly handing me a business card. "After you mentioned your dress yesterday, I started making calls to Mom's usual donation contacts. The women's shelter said nothing like that had come in, but they directed me to a consignment shop in Oakwood that sometimes gets Diana's cast-offs." My heart stuttered. "You think my dress might be there?" Olivia nodded. The shop owner remembered it specifically, said it was unlike anything Diana normally brought in. Vintage, with unusual embroidery and modified traditional elements. "Did they sell it?" I hardly dared to hope. "She held it aside," Olivia said, with a small smile. "Said it was too special to put out without making sure it wasn't a mistake. It's still there." I stared at the card, emotions I'd suppressed for days suddenly threatening to overflow. In the chaos of legal battles and community advocacy, I'd pushed away the personal loss the dress represented. My mother's handiwork, my grandmother's lace, the physical embodiment of my heritage that Diana had so cavalierly discarded. "Thank you," I whispered, squeezing Olivia's hand. "It's the least I can do," she replied, glancing toward the courthouse where Nathan and his legal team were now exiting, faces grim. "I've been blind to so much for so long." That evening, after the adrenaline of the courtroom victory had faded, I found myself in a small, upscale consignment shop in Oakwood, following the owner to a back room where garment bags hung in neat rows. When Miss Mitchell called, I knew exactly which dress she meant, the woman explained, carefully unzipping a protective cover. "I've been in this business 30 years. You can tell when something has meaning beyond the fabric." And there it was, my wedding dress, with my mother's precise embroidery along the bodice, the panels of lace from my grandmother's chipao integrated into the design, the subtle red thread accents that honored tradition while creating something uniquely mine. "It's beautiful workmanship," the shop owner commented. "Not at all what Mrs. Mitchell usually brings in." I ran my fingers over the familiar stitches, throat tight with emotion. "My mother and I worked on it together." "Well, it's yours again," she said, carefully rebagging the dress. "Miss Mitchell arranged to repurchase it for you." This unexpected gesture from Olivia brought a fresh wave of complicated feelings. As I carried the dress back to Zoe's loft, I wondered what it represented now. I would never wear it to marry Nathan, but it still embodied something vital, a heritage Diana Mitchell had tried and failed to erase. I arrived to find Zoe's loft transformed yet again, now into a strategic planning center. Jasmine, Marcus, Kevin, Tyler, and several Riverside community leaders were clustered around laptops and takeout containers, monitoring news coverage and planning next steps. "The 30-day reprieve is just the beginning," Jasmine was saying, as I entered. "We need a comprehensive community preservation plan with legal teeth, and alternative development proposals that can't be dismissed as anti-progress," Marcus added. They all looked up as I entered with the garment bag, their expressions softening at what must have been visible emotion on my face. "You found it," Zoe said quietly. "Olivia helped," I replied, carefully hanging the dress on a hook by the door. "It feels like closing a circle somehow." "Not closing," Jasmine corrected gently. "Reconnecting, your heritage to your future, just like what we're trying to do for Riverside." She was right, of course. This wasn't an ending, but a realignment of values, priorities, and purpose. The dress that Diana had discarded as unsuitable for a Mitchell bride had found its way back to me, just as I had found my way back to principles I'd nearly compromised away. "We've got something to show you," Tyler said, turning his laptop screen toward me. "While you were gone, we've been developing an alternative vision for Riverside." The screen showed architectural renderings of a revitalized neighborhood that preserved its character while addressing legitimate infrastructure needs. Mixed-income housing alongside rehabilitated historic structures, community gardens, and small business incubators. A development model that enhanced rather than erased. "It's beautiful," I said, studying the details. "But how would we fund something like this?" "That's where it gets interesting," Kevin interjected. "Since your gala revelation, I've been contacted by 3 ethical development groups interested in partnering with the community, and the city's Affordable Housing Fund, which has been sitting unused while the Mitchell projects got fast-tracked, could be redirected." "The Mitchell family isn't the only one with resources in this city," Marcus added meaningfully. "Just the least ethical in how they use them." I looked around at these people who had come together so quickly around a common cause. Jasmine, with her decades of community organizing experience, Marcus with his legal and financial expertise, Kevin with his investigative skills, Tyler with his inside knowledge of development processes, and the Riverside residents themselves with their deep commitment to their community. "I think we've got the beginnings of something powerful here," I said. "Not just opposition to the Mitchells, but a genuine alternative." My phone rang, an unknown number. I nearly ignored it until something made me answer. "Emily Chen," a cultured female voice said. "This is Barbara Watkins, Judge Watkins' wife." I straightened, puzzled by this unexpected contact. "Mrs. Watkins, how can I help you?" "I believe it might be how I can help you," she replied. "I serve on the board of the Westlake Community Foundation with Diana Mitchell. Or I did, until I resigned this afternoon in protest of their Riverside policies." I gestured for the others to listen as I put the call on speaker. "I appreciate your principles, Mrs. Watkins, but I'm not the only one," she continued. 3 other board members resigned as well, and we control significant funding that was earmarked for community development. Funding that no longer has to flow through Mitchell-approved channels. The implication was clear and game-changing. That would be extremely helpful to Riverside's preservation efforts, I said carefully. I thought it might be, Mrs. Watkins replied. My husband cannot discuss the case, of course, but I'm under no such restrictions. I've watched the Mitchells manipulate this city's development for years, and I'm not alone in my concern. The gala revelations gave many of us the opening we've been waiting for. After arranging to meet the following day, I hung up and looked at the suddenly energized faces around me. The Mitchells aren't just facing legal challenges, I realized aloud. They're losing their social capital. The one thing Diana values above all else. Power abhors a vacuum, Marcus observed. If the Mitchells lose their grip on Westlake's development future, something will fill that space. The question is, what? I glanced at my wedding dress, now hanging like a silent witness to our planning. The dress that had been discarded and reclaimed, just as we were now fighting to reclaim Riverside from those who would discard its value. Something better, I said with growing conviction. Something that honors heritage while building future. Something that recognizes that community isn't an obstacle to development. It's the whole point. As the night deepened, our plans took shape. Not just legal defense strategies, but a comprehensive alternative vision for what Riverside could become. The prenup that Diana had found so amusing had sparked more than just a personal reckoning. It had created an opening for long overdue change in how Westlake approached development, power, and community. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Mother just announced to the family she's stepping down from all foundation responsibilities due to stress. First time I've ever seen her retreat from anything. You've achieved the impossible. I showed the message to Zoe, who raised an eyebrow. Diana Mitchell surrendering her social throne? That's seismic. It's strategic, I corrected. She's regrouping, not surrendering. The Mitchells have too much at stake to simply walk away. As if to confirm my suspicion, another text arrived, this one from Nathan. This has gone far enough. Meet me tomorrow, alone. I have a proposal that can end this mess for everyone. Jasmine read the message over my shoulder and frowned. That sounds like either a threat or a bribe. Or both, I replied, studying the wording. But I think we need to hear what he's offering. It could be a trap, Tyler warned. Or it could be an opportunity, Marcus countered. If the Mitchells are feeling enough pressure to negotiate, we should at least listen. I nodded slowly, thinking of the vulnerable families who couldn't afford a protracted legal battle, of the businesses facing uncertain futures while the courts deliberated. We needed sustainable solutions, not just temporary victories. I'll meet him, I decided. But not alone, and not on Mitchell territory. As the others returned to their planning, I stepped away to the window, looking out at the city lights, with my recovered wedding dress visible in the reflection behind me. The path forward was uncertain, full of legal, financial, and personal complications I couldn't yet foresee. But one thing was clear. Diana Mitchell's attempt to erase my heritage had inadvertently set it free. In throwing away what she deemed unsuitable, she had released me from compromises I never should have made. The prenup she had dismissed as unnecessary formality had become a powerful tool for accountability. Sometimes, I reflected, watching the others work with renewed purpose, losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to what you were meant to find all along. I chose the Greenleaf Tea House for my meeting with Nathan, a small family-owned establishment in the neutral territory between downtown and Riverside. The Chen family had celebrated important occasions there since I was a child. My grandfather had known the original owners. Its quiet back room offered privacy without isolation. Important. Considerations given the unpredictable nature of what Nathan might propose. You're sure about this? My father asked, driving me to the meeting. He had arrived from San Francisco the previous evening, concern etched into his features after seeing the news coverage. My mother would join us the following day, delayed by obligations at their restaurant. I have to hear what he's offering, I replied, watching the familiar streets pass by. And I won't be alone. Marcus and Jasmine were already waiting inside, deliberately seated at a table within view, but out of earshot. Kevin Daniels had stationed himself inconspicuously near the entrance, ready to document anything that might require public attention. None of us trusted Nathan's sudden willingness to negotiate. My father squeezed my hand before I exited the car. Your mother and I are proud of you, Emily. Standing up for what's right isn't easy, especially when it costs you personally. The weight of his words stayed with me as I entered the tea house, its familiar sense of jasmine and oolong momentarily grounding me in memories of family celebrations, long before I'd ever heard the name Mitchell. Nathan arrived precisely on time, alone, but for a slim leather portfolio. He'd chosen a casual sweater rather than his usual business attire, a calculated attempt to invoke our personal connection rather than our adversarial legal positions. The absence of Diana or any Mitchell attorneys was telling. "Thank you for coming," he said, his tone carefully neutral as he took the seat across from me. Up close, I could see the strain of the past days in the shadows beneath his eyes, the tightness around his mouth. "You said you had a proposal," I replied, deliberately skipping any personal pleasantries. He glanced toward Marcus and Jasmine before returning his attention to me. "I was hoping we could speak privately." "Those days are over, Nathan. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of witnesses." Something flickered across his face. Frustration, perhaps disappointment. He'd always been able to persuade me in private, to make his case with gentle pressure and reasonable-sounding arguments that somehow always aligned with his interests. Fine. He opened the portfolio and removed several documents. Mitchell Properties is prepared to make significant concessions regarding Riverside. We'll withdraw the emergency demolition orders, commit to renovating rather than replacing the historic structures, and establish a community benefit fund. He slid the papers toward me. A beautifully packaged settlement offer that, upon closer inspection, contained more public relations value than substantive change. "These are press releases, not binding commitments," I noted, scanning the carefully worded promises. "And the community fund is contingent on proceeding with luxury development on half the sites." "It's a compromise, Emily. That's how business works." His voice took on the patient tone he'd often used when explaining what he considered the necessary realities of development. "We invest in the community while still creating value for our shareholders. Everyone wins. Except the families who would still be displaced from that half of Riverside." I pushed the papers back toward him. "This isn't a genuine offer. It's damage control." He leaned forward, dropping his voice. "What do you want then? What would it take to end this public spectacle? Name your price." The question hung between us, revealing much about how fundamentally he misunderstood what was happening. To Nathan, everything was ultimately transactional, every conflict resolvable through the right financial arrangement. "This isn't about a price, Nathan. It's about a principle." I met his gaze steadily. "The Riverside community isn't yours to displace or preserve based on your company's profit margins. These are people's homes, livelihoods, and heritage." "Don't be naive," he countered, an edge entering his voice. "Development happens. Cities change. We're just being strategic about inevitable market forces. There's nothing inevitable about predatory tactics and manufactured code violations." His jaw tightened. "The longer this drags on, the more damage to everyone involved, your reputation included." The implied threat was clear. The Mitchell machine had already begun painting me as unstable, vindictive, and professionally compromised. They would escalate if necessary. "If you're threatening me, I'm trying to solve this." He cut me off with a sharp gesture. "Look, I understand you're angry about the dress. Mother shouldn't have done that. It was insensitive. The calculated understatement nearly made me laugh. Insensitive? She deliberately threw away something irreplaceable because it didn't fit her vision of who I should be. Just like you're trying to erase Riverside because it doesn't fit your development vision. He sat back, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Is that what this is about? You're drawing parallels between a wedding dress and an entire neighborhood? I'm recognizing a pattern, I corrected. The dress was a symptom, not the cause. It showed me who the Mitchells really are, people who discard whatever doesn't serve their interests, whether it's cultural heritage, community ties, or ethical boundaries. Nathan's expression hardened. You don't know my family as well as you think. I know enough. Diana wouldn't be stepping down due to stress if there wasn't significant evidence backing our claims. His eyes narrowed. You've been talking to... Olivia? Your sister has a conscience, Nathan. Something I once thought we had in common. He fell silent, conflict visible in the set of his shoulders. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I had fallen in love with. Thoughtful, troubled by the gap between ideals and actions. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the pragmatic developer who had learned at Diana's knee that ends justified means. Here's what's going to happen, he said finally, his voice returning to the confident tone of someone accustomed to setting terms. We'll announce a revised development plan for Riverside. Historic preservation for 30% of the structures, market rate housing for the remainder, and relocation assistance for displaced residents. The Mitchell Foundation will establish a scholarship fund for Riverside youth. Your law firm will be credited with helping negotiate these community benefits. I stared at him, amazed by his persistent belief that this was simply a negotiation to be managed rather than a moral crisis to be addressed. That's not going to work, Nathan. The community needs genuine preservation and affordable housing, not token gestures and photo opportunities. Don't be unreasonable. The first signs of frustration cracked his composed facade. I'm offering significant concessions here. You're offering to slightly reduce the harm you've been causing, while still displacing most of the community and profiting from their displacement. His expression darkened. If you push this, Emily, things will get uglier. The Mitchell family has weathered larger scandals than this. We have resources and patience you can't imagine. Is that why Diana canceled her appearances at the symphony? Guild and the hospital board this week? Because she's so confident in weathering the scandal? The direct hit landed visibly. Diana Mitchell's social calendar was her battlefield and her kingdom. Cancellations were unprecedented. Mother is simply taking time to regroup, strategize, distance herself from the unfolding disaster, I finished for him. Meanwhile, Mitchell Properties stock has dropped 12% since the gala. 3 major investors have publicly expressed concern, and the city's zoning commission has called for a comprehensive review of all your permits. His expression registered surprise that I was so well informed about their company's internal troubles. The Mitchell family was accustomed to controlling the flow of information, particularly regarding their financial vulnerabilities. You've been busy, he acknowledged, a new wariness in his tone. I'm not the naive bride you seem to think I am, Nathan. I understand exactly what's at stake here. For the Mitchells, for Riverside, and for Westlake's entire approach to development. He studied me for a long moment, as if truly seeing me for the first time. What do you actually want, Emily? Beyond the legal battles and community organizing? What's your endgame here? The question deserved honest consideration. In the whirlwind since discovering my dress's disappearance and the Riverside fraud, I'd had little time to articulate a comprehensive vision beyond stopping immediate harm. Justice for the families who've been targeted, I began slowly. Genuine. Preservation of Riverside's cultural heritage and community character, and a new model for development in Westlake, one that respects existing communities rather than erasing them. Nathan shook his head, though not dismissively. That's idealism, not a practical solution. Development requires compromise. No, Nathan. What you're calling compromise is simply a slower form of erasure. Real compromise means everyone sacrifices something of value, not just those with the least power. Our tea arrived, momentarily pausing the tense exchange. The elderly server smiled in recognition. "Miss Chen, your grandfather would be pleased to see you here. He always said you would do important things." Her simple comment startled me. My grandfather, who had faced significant housing discrimination when he first arrived in America, had indeed spoken often about the importance of standing up for community rights. The weight of that heritage settled on me with new clarity. After she departed, Nathan leaned forward. "Look, I'm trying to find a way forward that doesn't destroy everything my family has built. Is that so difficult to understand?" "What about what other families have built?" I countered. "The Nguyens have owned their building for 50 years. The Diaz restaurant has been serving the community for 3 generations. Why is the Mitchell legacy more important than theirs?" He had no ready answer for that, a rare occurrence for someone usually armed with smooth justifications. "One last offer," he said finally. "A genuine partnership. Mitchell Properties will establish a community development board with real decision-making power. Half the seats go to Riverside representatives. Projects proceed only with majority approval. We preserve 40% of existing structures and ensure affordable housing options within the new development." The proposal was substantially better than his opening position, evidence that the Mitchells were feeling significant pressure. But fundamental problems remained. "Who selects the Riverside representatives?" I asked. "A joint committee of—" "The community selects its own representatives," I interrupted. "And it needs to be 60% preservation, not 40, with binding affordability requirements for new construction, not just options." "That's not economically viable," he protested. Immediately. "According to whose economic model? The one that maximizes Mitchell profits, or the one that preserves community well-being?" Our fundamental disconnect lay exposed between us. Nathan couldn't see past the development paradigm he'd been raised in, where community was an obstacle to overcome rather than a foundation to build upon. "I'll need to consult with our board," he said finally, gathering his papers. "That's fine. We'll continue with the legal process in the meantime." He stood, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, I am sorry about the dress. I didn't know what Mother had done until afterward." "But you didn't do anything about it when you found out," I pointed out. "Just like you knew about the predatory tactics in Riverside and chose not to intervene." His expression closed off again. "You're determined to see the worst in me now, aren't you?" "I'm determined to see clearly, Nathan. Something I should have done much sooner." After he departed, Marcus and Jasmine joined me at the table. "Well," Marcus asked, "how did the Great Mitchell Compromise go?" "About as expected. Their initial offer was insulting, their final offer insufficient, and he's retreating to consult the board while they develop a new strategy." Jasmine nodded knowingly. "Classic developer tactics: delay, divide, diminish expectations." "But he's worried," I noted. "The Mitchells aren't accustomed to losing social capital. Diana stepping back from her boards has him rattled." "Speaking of Diana," Marcus said, checking his phone. "Barbara Watkins just confirmed that 6 more foundation board members have resigned in solidarity. The Mitchell family is experiencing an unprecedented social exodus." This news, while encouraging, also concerned me. They'll respond aggressively. We need to prepare for their countermove. We didn't have to wait long. That evening, as I met with Riverside community leaders at the neighborhood center, Kevin Daniels burst in with breaking news. "Mitchell Properties just announced a major reorganization," he reported, handing me a printout. "Nathan's being promoted to Strategic Development Director while his cousin Jeffrey Mitchell is taking over as CEO. They're spinning it as a planned succession, but industry insiders are calling it damage control." I scanned the press release, noting the careful positioning. They're creating distance between Nathan and the company's public face while keeping him involved behind the scenes. Jasmine looked over my shoulder at the announcement. There's more. Look at page 2. They're announcing a community preservation initiative for Riverside. The initiative outlined in glowing terms essentially mirrored Nathan's final offer to me, but packaged as a generous corporate commitment to heritage and community. They were attempting to seize the narrative by implementing a watered-down version of our demands before we could press for more. They're trying to split the community, Mrs. Nguyen observed shrewdly. Some people will accept this offer, especially those most afraid of losing everything. She was right. The Mitchell proposal, while inadequate in addressing the full scope of community needs, offered enough immediate relief to tempt those in the most precarious positions. We need to respond quickly, I said, already drafting points for a counter-statement. Make it clear that while these concessions show the community's growing power, they fall short of genuine preservation and justice. Mrs. Nguyen touched my arm gently. Perhaps we need something more than words now. Something to show community what is possible beyond Mitchell plans. Her wisdom cut through the legal and public relations strategy to something more fundamental. The community needed not just protection from Mitchell properties, but a positive vision for its future. Something concrete to rally around. You're absolutely right, I realized. We've been playing defense. It's time to go on offense. The next morning, an unexpected ally emerged in our efforts to develop that positive vision. Olivia Mitchell arrived at Zoe's loft with a portfolio of her own, detailed design concepts for a riverside revitalization that honored the neighborhood's cultural character while addressing infrastructure needs. I've been working on these since before the gala, she explained, spreading the drawings across the table. I could never get Nathan or Mother to consider them seriously. They always said they were impractical or financially inefficient. Her designs were remarkable. Adaptive reuse of historic buildings, thoughtful integration of new construction that complemented rather than overwhelmed existing structures, and multi-use spaces that could serve as community anchors. These are extraordinary, Olivia, I said, genuinely impressed. This is exactly the kind of alternative vision Riverside needs. There's more. She hesitated, then continued. I've been in contact with Daria Westbrook at Heritage Capital. They specialize in culturally sensitive development projects with community ownership components. She thinks Riverside could be an ideal candidate for their investment model. The name resonated immediately. Heritage Capital was known for their innovative approach to development in historically significant neighborhoods, emphasizing preservation and community benefit alongside reasonable returns. Daria Westbrook, Marcus mused. She and Diana Mitchell have been social rivals for years. This could be interesting. It's not about the rivalry, Olivia insisted. Daria genuinely believes in a different development model, and she has the capital to make it viable. This potential partnership represented exactly the kind of positive alternative Mrs. Nguyen had suggested we needed. Not just opposition to the Mitchells, but a concrete, financially viable path forward. Can you arrange a meeting? I asked Olivia. She's already asked to meet with the Riverside leadership team. Tomorrow, if possible. The pace of developments was dizzying. Within 24 hours, we had gone from defensive legal maneuvers to potential partnership with one of the country's most innovative development funds, brought to us by Nathan's own sister, who had been silently developing an alternative vision even while the Mitchell machine pressed forward with its displacement plans. That afternoon, I visited my recovered wedding dress at my parents' hotel suite, where my mother had carefully examined every stitch to ensure it hadn't been damaged during its unwanted journey. Perfect, she pronounced, smoothing the fabric with practiced hands. Strong stitches hold even through rough handling. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Like our family traditions, she nodded, her expression both proud and concerned. Your father tells me you're meeting with important investors tomorrow for Riverside Fight. Yes. A development fund that specializes in preserving cultural neighborhoods while improving infrastructure. If they partner with us, it changes everything. Good. She sat beside me, taking my hands in hers. But remember, Emily, business. People always have business interests, even when they speak of community and culture. Her caution was well-founded. After decades running a successful restaurant in a changing neighborhood, my parents understood better than most how development promises often evolved in practice. I'll be careful, I assured her. We're not jumping at the first alternative just because we're desperate. Not desperate, she corrected firmly. Strong. Your position is strong now. Mitchell family losing face everywhere. Their friends suddenly not so friendly. My mother's assessment of the social dynamics was accurate. The Mitchell family's carefully cultivated image had cracked significantly, and Westlake's elite were recalibrating their allegiances. Barbara Watkins had reported that 3 charity events Diana had traditionally chaired were quietly seeking new leadership. We need to use that advantage wisely, I acknowledged. Push for substantive change while the pressure is greatest. My mother nodded, then returned to the dress, carefully folding it into archival tissue. What will you do with this now? The question caught me off guard. In recovering the dress, I hadn't thought beyond the recovery itself, the symbolic reclamation of what Diana had discarded. But my mother's practical question demanded consideration. What did this dress represent now? And what role would it play in my future? I don't know yet, I admitted. But it matters that we got it back, that she couldn't just throw away our heritage and have it disappear. Like Riverside, my mother observed with characteristic directness. Exactly like Riverside. The meeting with Daria Westbrook the following day exceeded our most optimistic expectations. Held in the community room of Riverside's oldest church, it brought together community leaders, legal advisors, design experts, and Heritage Capital's development team in a collaborative session unlike anything I'd experienced in my legal career. Traditional development models extract value from communities, Daria explained, her precise British accent contrasting with her progressive approach. Our model aims to create value with communities, ensuring they participate in both the decision-making process and the eventual economic benefits. She presented case studies from other cities where heritage had transformed threatened neighborhoods into thriving cultural districts that served both longtime residents and newcomers. The financial returns were solid, if not spectacular, sustainable, rather than extractive. The Mitchell model prioritizes maximum short-term profit, she continued, with a knowing glance toward Olivia. Our approach prioritizes maximum long-term value, cultural, social, and yes, financial. Mrs. Nguyen studied the heritage portfolio with careful attention before addressing Daria directly. Your other projects, the families who lived there before, they still live there now? 87% retention rate across our developments, Daria replied promptly. Maintaining community continuity is a core metric for us, not an afterthought. The community leaders exchanged glances, cautiously hopeful. Jasmine articulated what many were thinking. This sounds promising, but Riverside residents need guarantees, not just good intentions. Too many developers have made beautiful promises. Absolutely right, Daria agreed. That's why we implement community benefit agreements with legally binding provisions. She turned to me. I understand you have expertise in this area, Ms. Chen. We'd welcome your input on structuring protections that would give Riverside residents the security they deserve. The collaborative approach was refreshing after weeks of adversarial confrontation with Mitchell Properties. Here was a development partner who viewed community engagement not as an obstacle to overcome, but as a foundation for success. By the session's end, a tentative framework had emerged. Heritage Capital would fund architectural and engineering studies for Olivia's preservation-focused design concepts. Community leaders would establish a Riverside Development Council with binding approval authority. Legal teams would draft community benefit agreements ensuring affordable housing retention, local business support, and anti-displacement protections. As the meeting concluded, Jasmine pulled me aside, her expression a mix of hope and caution. "This could be transformative," she acknowledged, "but the Mitchells won't just walk away from their plans. They have too much invested." "I know," I replied. "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new phase." That evening, as if to confirm Jasmine's warning, I received a text from an unknown number. "Parking garage across from your law firm. Level 3, 7 p.m. Come alone if you want the full story about Riverside. Not what you think." I showed the message to Zoe and Marcus, who immediately advised against going. "Classic intimidation setup," Marcus warned. "Isolated location, anonymous, sender vague promises." But something about the message nagged at me. The phrasing seemed familiar somehow, though I couldn't place why. "If I don't go, we might miss something important," I argued, "but I won't go alone or unprepared." After considerable debate, we developed a safety plan. Kevin would position himself nearby with a photographer. Zoe would wait in a car with direct sight lines to the meeting point. I would wear a discreet recording device and share my location tracking. The parking garage was eerily quiet as I reached the third level at exactly 7 p.m. Motion-activated lights flickered on as I walked toward the center of the nearly empty space, my footsteps echoing against concrete walls. "Hello?" I called, scanning the shadows between parked cars. "You actually came alone." The voice emerged from behind a concrete pillar, familiar yet unexpected. "I wasn't sure you would." Diana Mitchell stepped into the light, immaculately dressed as always, but with a tension in her posture I'd never seen before. Her presence explained why the text's phrasing had seemed familiar. It carried her distinctive cadence. "Diana," I acknowledged, keeping my distance. "This is a surprise. Necessity creates strange circumstances, Emily." She glanced around the garage nervously. "I don't have much time. Nathan doesn't know I'm here." The vulnerability in her manner was so uncharacteristic that I found myself momentarily speechless. Diana Mitchell, the consummate society commander, reduced to clandestine garage meetings. "Why are you here?" I asked directly. "Because you need to understand what you're really dealing with." She opened her purse and removed a USB drive. "Riverside isn't just about luxury condominiums. There's something much larger at stake." I made no move to take the drive. "What do you mean?" "The Mitchell family has significant financial commitments tied to the Riverside development. Commitments to people who don't accept failure." Her voice dropped. "People who won't hesitate to use less savory tactics if their interests are threatened." The implication sent a chill through me. "Are you saying the Mitchell Properties has connections to—" "I'm saying be careful," she interrupted sharply. "Your legal challenges, your community organizing, your new partnership with Daria Westbrook, it's all above board and admirable. In its way. But not everyone plays by those rules." She held out the drive again. "Financial records, partnerships not visible on public disclosures. You'll understand when you see it." Cautiously, I accepted the drive. "Why are you doing this, Diana? This could damage Nathan's position even further." Something complicated passed across her perfectly maintained features. Fear, certainly, but also perhaps a flicker of maternal concern I'd never witnessed before. "Because while I disagree with your methods and your perspective on development, I don't want to see you harmed." She straightened her shoulders. "And because some lines shouldn't be crossed, even in business." With that cryptic statement, she turned to leave, then paused. "The dress," she said without looking back. "I shouldn't have disposed of it. It was unnecessary." Coming from Diana Mitchell, this oblique acknowledgement of wrongdoing was as close to an apology as I was likely to receive. "Thank you for this," I said, indicating the drive. "Whatever your reasons, She nodded once, sharply, then disappeared, between the parked cars, leaving me alone with questions multiplying by the second. What had driven the formidable Diana Mitchell to this secret meeting? What connections were hidden in the financial records she'd provided? And most troublingly, what less savory tactics might be employed if the Riverside opposition continued to gain momentum? As I returned to Zoe's waiting car, the USB drive felt unexpectedly heavy in my pocket. A digital Pandora's box that might reveal depths to the Mitchell operations I hadn't yet imagined. Diana's warning echoed in my mind, adding a new dimension of uncertainty to our already complex situation. "Who was it?" Zoe asked anxiously as I slid into the passenger seat. "Diana Mitchell," I replied, still processing the encounter. "And I think she just became a whistleblower against her own family." The contents of Diana's USB drive exceeded our worst expectations. Gathered around Zoe's dining table, our inner circle watched in stunned silence as Marcus methodically walked us through the documents displayed on her laptop. The financial records revealed a complex web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and silent partnerships that went far beyond normal real estate development practices. Coastal Ventures LLC. Marcus pointed to a highlighted entity on the screen. Officially, it's a minority investor in the Riverside project. In reality, it's controlled by Vincent Caruso. Kevin Daniels let out a low whistle. The same Vincent Caruso who was investigated for money laundering through his Atlantic City properties? The very same, Marcus confirmed. Never convicted, but several of his associates weren't so lucky. I studied the flow of funds illustrated in Diana's documents. So, Mitchell Properties is laundering money through the Riverside development? Not exactly laundering, Marcus clarified. More like providing a legitimate investment vehicle for capital of questionable origin. The luxury condos would create perfect opportunities for further wealth concealment through property purchases. Tyler Johnson, examining the plans from a developer's perspective, identified another troubling pattern. The construction contracts are all going to subsidiaries of GNS Holdings. That's George Santini's company. "Who's George Santini?" Jasmine asked, voicing my own question. "Construction magnate with ties to organized labor manipulation," Kevin provided. "He's been accused of using undocumented workers, then threatening deportation if they complain about safety violations or wage theft." The implications were staggering. Riverside wasn't just a standard development project with the usual ethical corners cut. It was potentially a nexus for multiple forms of financial and labor exploitation, all concealed behind the respectable Mitchell family name. "This explains Diana's cryptic warning," I said, the garage meeting now making more sense. "These aren't people who will simply accept legal defeats or community opposition." Zoe looked up from her examination of email correspondence included on the drive. "According to these messages, Nathan has been trying to distance the family from these partners for months, but they're refusing to be bought out." "That tracks with Diana's behavior," I acknowledged, reassessing my former future mother-in-law's actions. "She's trying to protect Nathan, perhaps the whole family, from the consequences of these partnerships, which is why she gave you the dress back," my mother observed quietly from where she sat with my father at the edge of our gathering. Always perceptive, she'd been silently absorbing the unfolding revelations. First step in making amends. Preparing. Ground for bigger request. Her insight struck me as fundamentally true. Diana Mitchell didn't do anything without calculation, even apparent acts of contrition. Returning my dress through Olivia had been the opening move in a larger strategy that culminated in the garage meeting. "So, what do we do with this information?" Jasmine asked, the practical community organizer focusing on next steps. "These connections make the Riverside situation far more dangerous, but also potentially more urgent to stop." Marcus leaned back, his expression grave. "We need to approach this carefully. These documents would certainly interest the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, but once that door opens, we lose control of the process and potentially put Riverside residents at greater immediate risk. We also need to consider the heritage. Capital partnership, Tyler added. If they get wind of potential criminal connections, they might pull out entirely. The room fell silent as we grappled with the complexity before us. What had begun as a fight against predatory development had evolved into something with potentially significant criminal dimensions. The stakes had escalated dramatically. My father, who had been quietly listening throughout our discussion, finally spoke. In business, when opponent is powerful but vulnerable, best strategy is not frontal attack. Best strategy is pressure point. What do you mean, Dad? I asked. These bad partners, they hide behind Mitchell name, yes? They need Mitchell reputation, Mitchell connections with city officials. If Mitchell family publicly separates from project, the partners lose their cover, Kevin finished, understanding dawning. Their legitimate front disappears. My father nodded. Exactly. You need Mitchell family as ally against worse enemy. The suggestion was both brilliant and deeply ironic, transforming the Mitchells from adversaries into reluctant collaborators. But it hinged on a critical assumption. We'd need Nathan and Diana to cooperate, I said skeptically, to publicly walk away from a massive investment and admit they've been involved with questionable partners. They might not have a choice, Marcus observed, reviewing another document from the drive. Look at this. Their liquidity position is surprisingly weak. The Mitchell family has been leveraging their existing properties to finance Riverside and other developments. If those projects stall, they could lose everything, Zoe concluded. Which is why Diana reached out, I realized. She's looking for an exit strategy that preserves some family assets and reputation. Jasmine remained pragmatic. This still doesn't solve the immediate problem for Riverside residents. Even if the Mitchells want to walk away, these partners clearly don't. That's where the community benefit agreement with Heritage Capital becomes crucial, I said, an integrated strategy beginning to form. We create a legitimate, financially viable alternative for Riverside that can withstand legal challenges and provide the Mitchells with a face-saving exit, while simultaneously preparing evidence for law enforcement about the criminal elements, Kevin added, but holding that card until the community position is secured. The complexity of what we were contemplating, essentially negotiating, with the same family I'd publicly exposed, while gathering evidence against their criminal partners, all while developing an alternative community-centered development plan, was daunting. But the pieces could work together if carefully orchestrated. I need to speak with Nathan alone, I concluded, seeing no alternative. Not at the tea house this time, somewhere truly private. Zoe immediately objected. After what we've just learned? Absolutely not. These connections make everything more dangerous. Which is precisely why it needs to be private, I countered. Nathan needs to be able to speak freely, without worrying about who might be listening. My mother, who had been watching me intently, nodded her understanding. Sometimes to untangle knot must speak directly with person who tied it. We debated security measures for nearly an hour before settling on a plan. The meeting would take place at my parents' restaurant in the private dining room after closing hours. My father's longtime staff would ensure no recording devices or uninvited guests entered the space. Tyler and Kevin would monitor the perimeter, while Marcus would be in an adjacent room, able to intervene if necessary. I sent Nathan a text message that referenced our first date, a private signal we'd established early in our relationship, for truly urgent matters. His response came within minutes. When and where? The Chen family restaurant had been my parents' life's work, a successful establishment that had evolved from a simple takeout counter to an acclaimed dining destination, featured in national publications. The private dining room, with its hand-painted mural of Hangzhou's Westlake and antique wooden screens, had hosted family celebrations, business negotiations, and community gatherings for decades. Nathan arrived precisely at 11 p.m., after the restaurant had closed to regular customers. My father escorted him through the kitchen entrance to avoid any possibility of being observed. His expression as he entered the familiar space, where he had once charmed my parents over dinner, where we had celebrated his successful development projects, was guarded but curious. "This is unexpected," he said, taking in the room where a pot of oolong tea and 2 cups awaited. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me without lawyers present." "Some conversations need to happen directly," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. "Especially conversations about Vincent Caruso and George Santini." The change in his demeanor was immediate and revealing, a tightening around the eyes, a momentary freeze in his movements before he carefully lowered himself into the chair opposite mine. "Where did you hear those names?" His voice had dropped to near a whisper. "Your mother came to see me. She provided extensive documentation about Mitchell Properties' financial partnerships." Disbelief and then anger flashed across his features. "Diana gave you company documents? That's impossible. She would never—" "She absolutely did," I interrupted. "Because she's terrified, Nathan, and based on your reaction, she should be." He fell silent, his gaze moving to the steaming tea I'd poured but neither of us had touched. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its defensive edge. "How much do you know?" "I know that Coastal Ventures is a front for Caruso's organization. I know that GNS Holdings has secured all the major construction contracts for Riverside. I know that you've been trying to extricate your family from these relationships and haven't succeeded. And I know that these aren't people who simply walk away from profitable arrangements." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I recognized from our most difficult conversations. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. The initial partnerships were just financial, capital infusions during the recession when legitimate funding dried up. By the time I understood who we were really dealing with, the entanglements were too deep." "And you didn't think this was worth mentioning during our 3-year relationship? Or perhaps before I agreed to marry into your family?" His expression flickered with genuine regret. "What was I supposed to say, Emily? By the way, my family business has connections to organized crime that we can't seem to sever. I was trying to fix it quietly. By accelerating the Riverside development," I concluded. "Pushing it through quickly to satisfy your partners and then using the profits to buy them out." He nodded, looking vaguely relieved that I understood the strategy, if not the ethics behind it. The faster we completed the project, the sooner we could settle accounts and move on with legitimate operations. The community opposition, the delays you've created, they're making a dangerous situation worse. I studied him carefully, separating tactical information from self-serving justification. "So you decided to sacrifice Riverside to save Mitchell Properties?" "I decided to make difficult business decisions to protect my family," he countered. "The kind of pragmatic choices successful developers make every day. Except most developers aren't laundering money for Vincent Caruso." His jaw tightened. "It's not that simple. Actually, it is that simple. You chose to prioritize Mitchell interests over legal obligations and community welfare, and now you're facing the consequences of those choices." Nathan leaned forward, his expression hardening. "What exactly do you want, Emily? If you have the documents Mother provided, you clearly have enough to create serious legal problems for us. So why this private meeting instead of a trip to the FBI?" The direct question brought us to the heart of the matter. I took a breath, organizing my thoughts carefully before responding. "Because sending the Mitchells to prison doesn't save Riverside. Because your criminal partners would likely still find ways to proceed with their plans, perhaps with even fewer constraints. And because, despite everything, I believe you want a way out of this mess." A complex mixture of emotions crossed his face: suspicion, hope, calculation. "And you think you have that way out?" "I think we can create one together," I replied. "A solution that protects Riverside, gives the Mitchell family a controlled exit, and addresses the underlying criminal elements without unnecessary collateral damage. He sat back, studying me with newfound attentiveness. I'm listening. Over the next hour, I outlined a coordinated strategy. Mitchell Properties would publicly announce a strategic repositioning, withdrawing from the Riverside project in favor of focusing on commercial developments in other areas. They would transfer their interests in Riverside to a new community development corporation established in partnership with Heritage Capital, with binding commitments to preservation and affordable housing. This gives you a face-saving exit, I explained. A pivot to new opportunities rather than a defeat. It allows you to begin disentangling from Caruso and Santini without a direct confrontation. They won't simply accept our withdrawal, Nathan pointed out. There are contractual obligations, expected returns. That's why the second phase involves carefully compiled evidence of their illegal activities, prepared for law enforcement, but held in reserve while they're given an opportunity to redirect their interests elsewhere. Less profitable for them in the short term, but safer than facing RICO investigations. Nathan absorbed the strategy, his developer's mind visibly calculating angles and contingencies. This would require delicate timing and significant trust between previously adversarial parties. It would, I acknowledged. Which is why we'd need absolute transparency moving forward. No more hidden agendas, no more secret partnerships. And the Mitchell family reputation, the social and financial consequences we've already suffered, would be significantly better than what you'd face if the Caruso and Santini connections became public, I pointed out. This approach gives you a controlled narrative, the family choosing to support community-based development as a corporate evolution rather than being forced into it by scandal. Nathan fell silent, weighing implications and alternatives. Finally, he asked the question I'd been anticipating. What guarantees do I have that once Mitchell Properties withdraws, you won't proceed with exposing everything anyway? The same guarantee I have that you'll follow through on your commitments. Mutual assured destruction, I replied candidly. Neither side can achieve its primary objectives without the other's cooperation. A hint of his old, appreciative smile appeared briefly. You've become quite the strategist, Emily. I've always been a strategist, I corrected. You just preferred not to notice when it didn't serve your interests. He acknowledged this with a slight inclination of his head. I'll need to discuss this with Mother and our board. There are complex financial implications. Of course, but don't take too long. Diana gave me those documents because she understood the urgency of your situation. The longer you remain entangled with Caruso and Santini, the fewer options you'll have. As Nathan prepared to leave through the same discreet kitchen exit, he paused, turning back to where I remained seated at the table. Why are you doing this? He asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. After what happened with the dress, after the public confrontation at the gala, you could simply destroy us and walk away. Why offer a collaborative solution? I considered the question carefully, sorting through my own complex motivations. Because this isn't about punishing the Mitchells, it's about saving Riverside. And because I believe in finding the most effective solution, not just the most satisfying one. He studied me for a long moment. I understand why my mother feared you as a daughter-in-law, he said finally. But I'm beginning to think she shouldn't have. After he departed, Marcus emerged from the adjacent room where he'd been monitoring our conversation. Think he'll agree? He asked, taking the seat Nathan had vacated. He doesn't have many alternatives, I replied. Diana's intervention suggests the Mitchell family recognizes their vulnerability. They need an exit strategy, and we're offering one that preserves some dignity and assets. It's a risky approach, Marcus cautioned. Coordinating with the same family that tried to destroy you while simultaneously preparing evidence against organized crime figures. The alternative is letting Riverside become collateral damage in either a prolonged legal battle or a criminal investigation, I replied. Neither serves the community's interests. By morning, events began moving with unexpected speed. Diana Mitchell contacted Marcus directly, requesting a formal meeting with Mitchell Properties' legal team and key board members. Nathan called, separately, confirming their interest in pursuing the strategic repositioning we had discussed. Most surprisingly, Olivia arrived at the community center with preliminary integration plans showing how her design concepts could be implemented through a phased transition from Mitchell Control to the new Community Development Corporation. I've been working on these since our Heritage Capital meeting, she explained, unfolding detailed schematics across a conference table. Nathan called this morning asking if they were ready to present. Jasmine studied the plans with cautious optimism. These actually address most of our preservation priorities, and the phased approach gives residents stability during the transition. It's what I've been trying to get the company to consider for years, Olivia admitted, but profit maximization always took precedence over design integrity or community impact. The Mitchell family's apparent cooperation brought both hope and heightened vigilance. Kevin Daniels, ever the investigative reporter, expressed what many of us were thinking. This seems too smooth. The Mitchells don't surrender territory this easily. They're not surrendering, I clarified. They're making a strategic withdrawal. From a compromised position, there's a difference. And what about their criminal partners? Tyler asked, the concern evident in his voice. I've dealt with Santini's construction managers. They don't politely step aside when plans change. This remained our most significant concern. While the Mitchells might see the wisdom in a controlled exit, Caruso and Santini operated by different rules and had different priorities. Their reaction to the Mitchells' repositioning could pose genuine dangers to everyone involved. These concerns materialized sooner than expected. That afternoon, as community leaders gathered to review Olivia's transition plans, Mrs. Nguyen arrived visibly shaken. Men came to my building, she reported, her usual composure rattled. Not regular. Mitchell people, different men, taking pictures, asking questions about who living there, who leading community meetings. Very aggressive questions. Similar reports quickly emerged from other Riverside residents. Unknown men conducting intimidating surveys of businesses. That had been vocal in the preservation efforts. Unmarked cars parked for hours outside the community center. A small fire at the back entrance of the restaurant owned by the Diaz family, who had spoken at the courthouse hearings. They're mapping the opposition, Tyler concluded grimly, identifying key figures and pressure points. The situation demanded immediate response. Marcus accelerated our legal preparations, compiling documentation for potential restraining orders. Kevin activated his media network, ensuring any incidents would receive immediate public attention. Jasmine organized community watch rotations, ensuring no resident faced intimidation alone. I contacted Nathan directly. Your partners are already making moves. We need to accelerate our timeline. His response was terse. Board meeting tomorrow. Morning. Emergency executive session. Be ready to present immediately after. The pressure intensified overnight. The community center's windows were broken by unknown vandals. The Heritage Capital representative received an anonymous call warning against involvement in Riverside. My parents' restaurant, the same one, where Nathan and I had met privately, received a health department complaint that triggered an immediate inspection. Not coincidence, my father stated flatly as the inspector left after finding no violations. They sending message, they know, about meeting. The implications were chilling. If Caruso and Santini were aware of our private discussions, they were monitoring both the Mitchell family and our coalition more closely than we'd realized. The timing of our countermoves would be critical. The Mitchell Properties emergency. Board meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. at their downtown headquarters. By 10:37 a.m., I received the call from Marcus that would set our plans in motion. "It's done," he reported. "The board has approved the strategic repositioning. They're drafting the public announcement now, emphasizing new commercial opportunities and community-responsive development models." "And the Riverside transition?" "Approved in principle. Olivia will lead the handover team, working directly with the Community Development Corporation and Heritage Capital. Diana presented it as a brand enhancement opportunity rather than a retreat." The Mitchell family's ability to reframe defeat as strategic evolution was impressive, if somewhat cynical. But the more important question remained unanswered. How did they address the Caruso and Santini relationships? Marcus's hesitation told me everything. They didn't, not explicitly. Nathan simply indicated that all contractual obligations would be honored through appropriate financial settlements. The details were conspicuously vague. This confirmed my suspicion that the Mitchell family was attempting to maintain a precarious balancing act, publicly repositioning while privately negotiating exits from their problematic partnerships. A dangerous game if their partners already sensed betrayal. "We need to move quickly with the community benefit agreements," I told Marcus. "Lock in the protections while the Mitchells are publicly committed." "Already on it," he assured me. Jasmine and the Riverside Leadership Council are reviewing the draft now. Heritage Capital has their legal team standing by to finalize terms. Within hours, Mitchell Properties issued their press release announcing their strategic repositioning. The carefully crafted statement emphasized evolving market opportunities and responsive development models, positioning the Riverside change as a forward-thinking business decision rather than a retreat. Financial analysts immediately began speculating about the company's motivations, with several noting the growing community opposition and questioning whether the Mitchells were cutting losses in the face of protracted legal challenges. Mitchell stock initially dropped on the announcement before stabilizing as investors absorbed the full repositioning strategy. What happened next, however, was beyond anyone's predictions or preparations. As I left a planning meeting with Riverside community leaders, Zoe called with urgent news. "Turn on any news channel," she instructed, her voice tight with tension. "It's happening now." I rushed to the nearest television in the community center's office. Every major network was broadcasting the same dramatic scene: FBI agents leading Vincent Caruso from his downtown office in handcuffs. The scrolling headline read, "Breaking. Developer Caruso arrested in massive financial crimes investigation." "What the hell?" I whispered, watching the scene unfold. This wasn't part of our carefully sequenced plan. We had compiled evidence but hadn't yet approached federal authorities, precisely to maintain control over the timing and narrative. My phone rang. Nathan, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Did you do this? Is this your idea of coordination?" "This wasn't us," I replied honestly. "We haven't approached any federal agencies yet." "Then who?" He stopped abruptly, realization apparently dawning. "I need to go. Mother's trying to reach me." Before I could respond, he disconnected. Within minutes, Marcus called with his own update. "It's not just Caruso. They're executing search warrants at Santini's offices and homes, and at 3 separate Mitchell Properties locations." The implications hit me with stunning clarity. "Diana," I said. "She went directly to the FBI." "Without telling anyone," Marcus confirmed, "including her son and the Mitchell board. She must have provided enough evidence to trigger immediate action." Diana Mitchell, the family matriarch, who had once contemptuously discarded my wedding dress, had made a unilateral decision to burn everything down, sacrificing significant Mitchell assets and social standing to sever the criminal connections once and for all. As we watched the arrests and raids unfold on live television, I tried to process Diana's motivations. Was this desperate self-preservation? A mother's protection of her son from escalating danger? Or something more complex? A recognition that The Mitchell legacy she had guarded so jealously had become unsalvageable in its current form. Whatever her reasons, Diana's dramatic intervention had irrevocably changed the landscape of our struggle. The criminal elements were being publicly exposed and neutralized. The Mitchell family's carefully constructed reputation lay in tatters, and Riverside's future now hung in a precarious balance between opportunity and uncertainty. "What happens now?" Jasmine asked, joining me as we watched FBI agents removing boxes of documents from a Mitchell Properties satellite office. "Now," I replied, "we make sure Riverside doesn't become collateral damage in the Mitchell family's implosion." 6 months after Diana Mitchell's dramatic intervention with the FBI, I stood in the community garden that Mrs. Nguyen had fought. So hard to preserve. Spring sunlight filtered through newly planted cherry trees, warming the rich soil where generations of Riverside families had grown vegetables and medicinal herbs. Around me, the neighborhood hummed with activity, construction, crews carefully renovating historic structures, community members painting murals on previously blank walls, and planning teams gathered around outdoor tables, reviewing the next phases of the Riverside Revitalization Initiative. The aftermath of the FBI raids had been chaotic and transformative. Vincent Caruso and George Santini both faced federal indictments on multiple charges ranging from money laundering to labor trafficking. 3 Mitchell Properties executives had been arrested for financial crimes, though Nathan had thus far avoided criminal charges. The Mitchell family fortune had diminished dramatically as assets were frozen, projects collapsed, and legal bills mounted. Diana Mitchell had disappeared from public view entirely, reportedly retreating to the family's rarely used property in Switzerland. The society pages that had once chronicled her every charity gala and committee chairmanship now speculated about potential immunity deals and grand jury testimony. Her final act of control had been to sacrifice the Mitchell empire to save what remained of the family name. "Quite a change from when we first met here," Jasmine observed, joining me by the garden's edge. She gestured toward a group of architecture students sketching the neighborhood's distinctive roof lines under Olivia Mitchell's guidance. "Sometimes destruction precedes creation," I replied, watching as Mrs. Nguyen demonstrated proper planting techniques to neighborhood children. Though I never imagined it would unfold quite this way. The legal and financial collapse of Mitchell Properties had created both crisis and opportunity for Riverside. The community had faced weeks of uncertainty as development plans stalled. Jobs disappeared, and ownership of numerous properties fell into complex legal limbo. But from that chaos emerged a revolutionary approach to neighborhood revitalization. Heritage Capital, displaying remarkable commitment despite the scandals, had maintained their partnership with the newly formed Riverside Community Development Corporation. With Daria Westbrook's guidance, they established an innovative ownership model that gave residents equity stakes in the neighborhood's revitalization while bringing in necessary capital for infrastructure improvements. Olivia Mitchell, breaking decisively with family tradition, had donated her full inheritance to establish the Preservation Design Institute, which now occupied the former Mitchell Properties headquarters. The institute provided training for local residents in historically appropriate renovation techniques, creating sustainable jobs while ensuring the neighborhood's architectural heritage would be maintained by the people who valued it most. "The first community-owned buildings are ready for occupancy next week," Jasmine noted, checking her tablet. 27 families who would have been displaced by the original Mitchell plan will instead be shareholders in their own homes. "And the commercial spaces?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'd helped draft the agreements. 15. Local businesses secured with long-term affordable leases and first right of purchase when the initial terms expire, she confirmed. The Diaz restaurant is already renovating their expanded kitchen. The transformation extended beyond physical structures. The Riverside Community Trust, established with settlement funds from the Mitchell cases, provided microloans for resident entrepreneurs and educational scholarships for neighborhood youth. Community gardens were being expanded into a network, of green spaces connected by pedestrian pathways. The cultural heritage that Diana Mitchell had once dismissed as an obstacle to progress had become the foundation for sustainable revitalization. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Turn on Channel 7 now. Nathan's making a statement." Jasmine and I hurried to the community center where a television was always tuned to local news. We arrived to find a small crowd already gathered, watching intently as Nathan Mitchell stood before a bank of microphones outside the federal courthouse. He looked thinner than when I'd last seen him, the confident developer's polish diminished by months of legal scrutiny and public humiliation. Yet he carried himself with a composed dignity I hadn't expected. After extensive cooperation with federal investigators, he was saying, "I am announcing today that Mitchell Properties will undertake a complete restructuring under court supervision. All remaining assets will be directed toward fulfilling our obligations to communities impacted by past development practices." The reporter's questions came rapidly. "Will you face criminal charges? Where is your mother? Is this the end of the Mitchell family business?" Nathan answered with careful precision, neither admitting specific wrongdoing nor attempting to justify past actions. "My focus now is on making amends where possible and ensuring that the Mitchell name is eventually associated with responsibility and restoration rather than exploitation." When asked directly about Riverside, he acknowledged the community-led revitalization without attempting to take credit for it. "What's happening in Riverside represents the future of ethical urban development, respecting existing communities, while bringing necessary improvements. I hope other developers will learn from both our mistakes and the remarkable solution Riverside residents have created." As the statement concluded, the community center erupted in murmured conversations. Nathan's public contrition, while carefully couched in legal considerations, represented something few had expected: an acknowledgement, however limited, of the harm the Mitchell development model had caused. "Think he means it?" Jasmine asked skeptically. "Partially," I replied. "Necessity has forced a reckoning that choice never would have, but recognition is still recognition, regardless of the path that led there." Later that afternoon, I received an unexpected message requesting a meeting. Nathan wanted to see the Riverside revitalization firsthand, to understand the community-based model that had replaced his luxury development vision. After consultation with community leaders, we agreed, with clear parameters and no media presence. He arrived without entourage or pretense, dressed simply in clothes that wouldn't have identified him as a Mitchell to casual observers. His reaction, as Mrs. Nguyen proudly guided us through the garden and renovated buildings, was complex. Professional interest in the development approach mingled with visible regret for what might have been lost. "The financial returns are obviously lower than our original model," he observed, reviewing the project financials I'd shared. "But the sustainability metrics are impressive. These structures will still be generating value 50 years from now." "That was always the difference in our perspectives," I noted. "Your model extracted maximum short-term value. This model creates enduring value distributed among many stakeholders." He nodded, absorbing this fundamental distinction. "I've been consulting with Olivia about incorporating some of these principles into the Mitchell restructuring plan. The court-appointed trustees are interested in demonstrating a genuine change in corporate philosophy. Rehabilitation through demonstration," I observed. "Clever strategy." A hint of his old smile appeared briefly. "I still think in terms of strategy. Some habits persist, even after everything changes." As we completed our tour near the community center, Nathan paused, his expression growing more serious. "I owe you an apology, Emily. Not just for the Riverside situation, but personally. I was so focused on maintaining the Mitchell trajectory that I never truly saw or valued who you were." The acknowledgement surprised me with its directness. "The dress was the clearest symbol of that," I replied after a moment. "Diana throwing it away because it didn't fit her vision of a Mitchell bride. Mother's action reflected values I tacitly supported," he acknowledged. The same values that justified displacing Riverside residents because they didn't fit our development vision. Different expressions of the same fundamental problem. His insight was unexpectedly profound, connecting personal and professional ethics in a way he had previously compartmentalized. Perhaps the months of legal scrutiny and public condemnation had forced a deeper self-examination than I had anticipated. "What will you do now?" I asked. "After the restructuring is complete?" "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. "The Mitchell name will carry complications for years to come. But I'm exploring opportunities in remediation development, transforming contaminated industrial sites into usable spaces. It seems appropriate." As he prepared to leave, Nathan hesitated. "And you? Will you continue with community development work?" The question touched on something I'd been considering for months. My law career had taken an unexpected turn through this experience, opening possibilities I hadn't previously imagined. "I'm establishing a specialized practice focused on community benefit agreements and equitable development frameworks," I explained, "helping other neighborhoods achieve what Riverside has created here." He nodded thoughtfully. "From wedding planning to community planning, a significant evolution." "Not really," I corrected him. "Both require understanding what people truly value and creating structures that preserve it. I just found my more authentic application." After Nathan departed, I walked alone through the streets of Riverside, passing buildings where families who might have been displaced were now secure in their homes. The neighborhood had always possessed a vibrant cultural identity, but now that identity was protected and empowered rather than endangered. My path took me to my parents' restaurant, where my mother was teaching a cooking class to neighborhood youth as part of a cultural heritage program. My wedding dress, carefully restored and preserved, now hung in a display case in the restaurant's entry, accompanied by a small plaque explaining its significance. Not as a garment I would wear, but as a symbol of heritage reclaimed, and authenticity honored. "Your dress teaches many lessons," my mother observed, joining me after her class concluded. "When someone throws away what matters to you, sometimes universe-giving opportunity to find what matters more." Her wisdom, as always, distilled complex truths to their essence. Diana Mitchell's dismissive disposal of my wedding dress had indeed created the opening through which I'd discovered more meaningful work and purpose than I might have found as a Mitchell bride. "The dress found its right place," I agreed, "just not the one anyone expected." That evening, the Riverside community gathered for the official launch of the Neighborhood Preservation Trust, a legal entity that would ensure the community-centered development model continued regardless of market pressures or political changes. As one of the architects of its founding documents, I had been asked to speak about its significance. Standing before neighbors who had become colleagues and friends through months of struggle and creation, I reflected on the journey that had brought us all to this moment. "When powers greater than ourselves discard what we value," I began, "they often believe they're simply clearing space for their own vision of progress. What they fail to understand is that communities, like individuals, hold within themselves the seeds of their own authentic evolution. Our heritage isn't an obstacle to growth. It's the foundation that makes meaningful growth possible." Around me, I saw the evidence of this truth. In Riverside's renewed buildings and thriving businesses, in Mrs. Nguyyen's flourishing garden, in the confidence of residents who had transformed from victims of displacement to architects of their community's future. What Diana Mitchell had attempted to throw away, both literally in my wedding dress and figuratively in Riverside's cultural fabric, had instead been reclaimed and reimagined. The prenuptial agreement she had dismissed as unnecessary formality had become the legal leverage that ultimately protected both. Sometimes, I reflected as the community celebration continued around me, what appears to be an ending, a discarded dress, a canceled wedding, a threatened neighborhood, is merely the necessary beginning of something far more authentic and enduring than what was originally planned. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.